Today's video is built on the foundation of our last video, in which we spoke about how we are always saying I am, either to what we consciously want to say I am to, or what we unconsciously say I am to based on the programming within the self-image. So what we really want to do on this journey to bring forth our vision is look at a couple of experiences as opportunities. Number one, when we experience proactivity, as well as number two, when we experience reactivity. Proactivity can be looked at as we know what we have to do and we do those things. Some way, somehow, we are in the flow and things work out. Proactivity. We seem to know what to do, what to say at the right place at the right time. And we feel one with the journey and the destination. On the flip side, we have reactivity, in which we go through a certain experience on the day, or a certain interaction with a person, or we think about something in relation to something we are experiencing. And we feel this kind of tension, or frustration, or immobilization, stagnation, some kind of emotional response, which we can call reactivity. A lot of times we tend to value the proactivity, and we tend to run away from the reactivity. And what we really want to do is understand this reactivity, so we can reconcile our views on certain aspects of reality, the divergent views, and create inner peace. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, the premise, or what stimulated this conversation, was this particular quote here from the Master Key System, in which he says, "All possession is based on consciousness. All gain is the result of an accumulative consciousness. All loss is the result of a scattering consciousness." So generally, when we feel and we behave and when we interact with our day-to-day experience from the perspective of proactivity, when we feel we are proactive, when we see ourselves being proactive, we find ourselves in an accumulative consciousness, such as the case on the entrepreneurial journey. Opportunities show up, we seize them, we complete our tasks, our projects, we engage in the day-to-day activities, and we see the KPIs, the performance indicators, moving forward as we produce results. And on the flip side, as mentioned, we have reactivity. And we can relate that over to what he says as all loss is the result of a scattering consciousness. Rather than maintaining a lighthearted state of mind, which is an affirmation to the vision, for whatever the reason may be, and now we are in the process of discovering it more so, our consciousness gets scattered by reactivity. So to help us with this, to transmute reactivity into proactivity, to help us identify what we are unconsciously saying I am to via reactivity, what we really want to understand is this particular quote here from the book The Kabbalion, in which it states, "The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the difference between things seemingly diametrically opposed to each other is merely a matter of degree. It teaches that the pairs of opposites may be reconciled, and that thesis and antithesis are identical in nature but different in degree, and that the universal reconciliation of opposites is affected by a recognition of this principle of polarity. They show that the all and the many are the same, the difference being merely a matter of degree of mental manifestation. Thus the law and laws are the two opposite poles of the one thing. Likewise, principle and principles, infinite mind and finite minds. Then passing on to the physical plane, They illustrate the principle by showing that heat and cold are identical in nature, the difference being merely a matter of degrees. So what we want to use as a reference is heat and cold. We realize that it can be even hotter. It could be even colder. And there are all these varying degrees before we apply the subjective interpretation that we feel hot or we feel cold in a room. If we turn up the temperature, we can feel hotter. Or if we lower the temperature, we may start to feel colder. We're still referring to temperature, but we are experiencing it in different degrees. So one of the aspects of the journey is reconciliation. When we commit to a journey or a vision, we go down a journey to realizing the vision. And what we have presented on the journey, opportunities. Opportunities to identify the proactivity and further encourage it. And opportunities to identify the reactivity so that if a person may desire to do so, they could change the interpretations within themselves that seems to bring forth this kind of reactivity, which then brings us into different states of mind. For an example, let's say a person comes up with an idea. They decide that they are going to move to another country. They're committing to it. And they see themselves, in the end, having a certain experience, a lifestyle in this country that they decide to move to. So as they continue moving down the journey, doing the things that whatever they have to do to move to that country, such as find out about how they can meet new people, what neighborhood they decide to live in, all these different logistical and administrative or project-based things that they got to do, they might find some reactivity. All of a sudden, they might find themselves fearful. Maybe they might feel that they won't have the kind of friends that they have in the country that they have right now. They now find themselves being stressed out, frustrated, correlating some interpretations within themselves, doubting themselves that they're going to be able to live this ideal lifestyle in this country that they committed to, that they really desire to live in. What they're demonstrating in that moment is saying I am to some form of external locus of control. And what we want to say I am to is some form of internal locus of control. So let's get into the distinction between the two, because we want to tie this all into what we're learning here from the Kybalion. So external locus of control, a person believes that the power is outside of them. They believe that they'll go to this country and fear conjures up all these imaginary scenes of potentialities and possibilities in which, from a reactive perspective, they begin to identify with, which changes their state of mind, which then changes their behaviors and changes their actions and alters their perception of reality. They're essentially believing that they can't have what they truly want. They're not applying what we refer to as internal locus of control, which have these attributes: taking responsibility for their reality, not overly being influenced by different opinions. Perhaps they receive some opinions in which they interpret those opinions as, when they go to this country, they won't be able to form a group of friends that will be ideal, even though they once imagined themselves living in an ideal way in this new country. For whatever the reason may be, they form these interpretations within themselves, usually based on past experiences. And as they were going about the day-to-day journey, doing their things, it was some reactive-based interpretations within playing out as theater. And they were emotionally finding themselves reactive. And what they want to recognize is this law of polarity here, because the goal is to reconcile the journey and the destination, see them as one. Mind weaves it as a journey to the destination. And in those moments, we have identified within ourselves some attributes or some ways of thinking, some beliefs, some interpretation, where we are saying I am to through elements related to internal locus of control and elements related to external locus of control. And based on our identification with those attributes from the perspective of internal locus of control or external locus of control, we have the experiences, be it unnecessary complexity and convolution on the journey as a result of external locus of control based identifications, what we are saying I am to internally, or internal locus of control, what we are saying I am to, in which we feel energized, proactive, one with, in flow. And here's the key: the polarization is in the degree. So some element within the journey to the destination can be looked at as the degree. Now, it could seem easier when you're looking at it from the perspective of temperature, hot and cold. But upon reflection and further practice in working with the principle of polarity, by observing what you react to each day on the journey and changing the relationship to it, you'll find yourself not polarizing to that degree of the journey. So time between when you commit to the vision and when you bring forth the vision, all that time in between can be looked at as degrees. And in those moments of time in between, you have life experiences. You have people, environment, circumstance, and information that is playing out as a result of what's in the subconscious mind within consciousness, which reveals itself as the journey to the destination. And whatever it is that reveals itself on the journey to the destination is what we are saying I am to. And what we want to do is gauge what we are saying I am to from the perspective of external locus of control, which we can relate over to reactivity, or as he calls, scattering consciousness, or from the perspective of internal locus of control, so we can encourage it, which we can call accumulative consciousness, which, as we've been discussing throughout our videos, we've been referring it also to prosperity consciousness, or from our Neville Goddard conversations, first class concept of self. So, this is the exciting thing about the journey. We can identify these different interpretations that we are unconsciously saying I am to based on how we react, and release from that reactivity, or note that reactivity, and reflect back at the end of the day, or if you have a moment to release in the moment, pause, release from the identification, and run it through a very simple filter. Fundamentally, one of three things, or a combination of these three things, which is we can change how we relate to it, we can change our beliefs, our interpretations, our perspectives, our perception on that particular experience. We can find one that will be ideal and identify with it. We can accept it the way it is. Let's use the example of the person being reactive, thinking that they won't be able to have this group of friends that they want to have for whatever the reason may be. They can say, well, you know what? I accept that I feel this way right now, but some way, somehow, when I get there, it's going to work out. We're going to figure it out when we get there. Right now, I got to work on these projects. When they release from that reactivity, they automatically find themselves further encouraging an ideal self-image or programming from the perspective of internal locus of control. Because after all, what they did was they, within themselves, took responsibility for their reality. They found themselves back in the flow. They kept their attention on what they want. They also rise up to higher levels of confidence because they saw themselves experiencing a challenge and changing themselves so they no longer feel that challenge. They have acquired new skill, in which when we relate to flow, from the book Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, It is defined as where challenge meets skill. And because they have changed their perception or their perspective or the meaning, the beliefs, the interpretations, the assumptions within themselves and identified with it, what they find is the unnecessary is easily excluded out of consciousness. Because if we go back here, it says, all gain is a result of accumulative consciousness. All loss is a result of scattering consciousness. So they're not fighting against an experience that they have in which, when they emotionally integrate, they feel reactivity. And they're not denying it, but they're dedicating some time to understand the source of this, which is the programming within themselves, and changing it. The third thing is they could do something different. If they find, for example, that they're getting more reactive because they've been working from home all day long and they need some fresh air and they need to go into nature and go for a walk, and they go and do that thing, upon reflection, they realize that they're being less reactive. All of this is about knowing ourselves. So we learn about ourselves on the journey to realizing our vision because we identify within ourselves what we are saying I am too. Essentially, what am I saying I am too? So reactivity a lot of times can be looked at as something that we want to avoid, we don't want to experience. But when we go meta to reactivity and we change our perspective around in regards to reactivity, then we see reactivity as an opportunity. And we lighten up the grip that it seems to have on us, which brings us into different states of mind, breaks our flow. And when we recognize this principle of polarity, then we can also apply it further by valuing the journey as much as we value the destination. And how do we value the journey? By looking at these particular experiences of reactivity as the teacher, revealing to us about ourselves so we can understand ourselves, so that we can change our perspectives around. And then as we go through those similar experiences or whatever it is that we have to do on the journey, we experience less reactivity and more proactivity. Another way to really understand and grasp this concept of polarity is to understand how we relate to others. I believe that people provide us a great opportunity to practice working with the principle of polarity. What you will find is many different paradigms, many different perspectives, many different identities, many different viewpoints on how reality works. And it's important to listen and understand people, because through the process of listening and understanding, this is why I really recommend leadership or mentorship. It gives you an opportunity to connect with somebody and understand their paradigm, how they see reality. And by identifying within ourselves if we are being reactive to anything that they are saying, we then see it as an opportunity to change those interpretations within ourselves. And what we'll find is how we communicate to them will change, and how we relate to them will change. The same is to be said about information. When we're consuming information, we want to identify where we are being reactive to perhaps what an author is suggesting, or a belief, or an opinion. And these elements, via the reactivity, are what we are polarizing to. We are the source of the interpretations in relation to that particular attribute, which helps understand and reconcile those different attributes and thus experience more flow on the journey to the destination. And what this does is bring forth a higher degree of internal locus of control. Again, the attributes in relation are we take responsibility for reality. We're not overly influenced by opinions because we recognize that we are forming the conclusions within ourselves in relation to information that is presented as opinion. Ultimately, we are the interpreter within, and we are saying I am to the different aspects on the journey based on our proactive thinking in relation to that information, or the reactivity in relation to that experience or that information. And then that is altering our state of consciousness. It is either putting us into an accumulative consciousness or a scattering consciousness. Now, as we reconcile this within ourselves, as we make peace within ourselves by, as mentioned, three things: accept it the way it is, do something different, or to change how we relate to it. Ideally, you want to first release from the reactivity so that you can find the accurate interpretation within ourselves. This is why I always suggest connecting to your inner voice and intuition, because it is found, as we've been discussing in our last handful of discussions, within ourselves. These answers are found within ourselves. The accurate meaning, the accurate interpretation, which is more from the perspective of internal locus of control. So more so every day, we are moving from external locus of control over to internal locus of control. And as we continue this journey of internal locus of control, we find ourselves automatically being more proactive, being less reactive. And if we see the reactivity, if we experience the reactivity, we see it as an opportunity to reconcile aspects within ourselves in which we are understanding that we are polarizing to certain aspects of the journey to the destination. And by making peace with those attributes in relation to the journey, to the destination, we can legitimately feel one with the journey and the destination. As I say, value the journey and destination and see them as one. What this does is further encourages what he refers to as the accumulative consciousness, which further encourages this ideal state of mind, which then further encourages the ideal self-image. And through this ideal state of mind, ideal self-image, we find ourselves automatically seeing I am too from the accurate perspective in relation to whatever shows up on the journey, from a harmonious integration to internal locus of control. And then what happens is, as a person continues to live like this, more so every day, is they know what to do, what to say, when not to do something. They find themselves automatically doing the things that are ideal. Hunches, inspirations are found within themselves. They feel a higher degree of self-confidence. They understand themselves better, as mentioned through the exercise of valuing when we see reactivity in conversation or information exchange with another person. They feel more relatable to others. As a result, they find more peace in their environment. As a result, they find more peace in their business, for example, with their team members, their prospects, their clients, their vendors, their business partners. They start to find deeper connections and a greater ability to form conclusions in a mastermind relationship with another person. As mentioned, when two minds, three minds show up and they're looking for an exchange of perspective and they're seeking to understand each other, they will form the understanding-based proactive connections, and through those connections, they will stimulate new innovative ideas, creative insights, inspirations, and so forth. So we are going to further go down this thread of working with the principle of polarity because I believe it's very valuable. Essentially, what we're doing when we work with the principle of polarities, we're recognizing that it's one, but there are varying degrees of individualization. And what we want to do is make peace with those varying degrees of individualization. And by doing that, we can automatically allow ourselves to be guided from within to identify with the accurate degree in relation to. For example, if you look at the world we live in, we have more information available on the internet today which is easily accessible, more so than ever before. And this information is going to increase. And not only is there a lot of information on a particular subject, but there are many different individualized perspectives on that particular subject. What a person then wants to do is not be reactive to the different perspectives, so they can be guided from within via intuition to find the accurate perspective in which they can integrate in relation to whatever it is they need to integrate that with. Like, for example, in the entrepreneurial space, there's a lot of different ways of marketing your business. There's a lot of different ways of growing your business. And there's a lot of different opinions, viewpoints, perspectives, case studies, strategies, principles, techniques to do these things. If you consume a lot of this kind of information, you can feel overwhelmed on your journey to building your business and having that vision of the business success. But when we recognize that we're polarizing to these different viewpoints, we can then say, why are we polarizing to these different viewpoints, and find the accurate interpretation within, depolarize ourselves from those different viewpoints, and then allow ourselves to automatically cycle and find the accurate viewpoint. Now, applying what is being suggested here will allow you to process large volumes of complex information, will allow you to be at a greater degree of peace, and you will find that you will maintain a higher degree of internal locus of control, because what you'll find is that the source of what information is needed or where your attention needs to go is going to be found from within, and thus you will learn to listen to yourself and trust yourself to a higher degree. That's why it's very important to work with what is being suggested here and to practice it. Identify each day what you are being reactive to. Reflect upon it at the end of the day or in the moment, and recognize that the first thing we want to do is release from that reactivity. And then number two, change our internal relationship to that attribute, or do something different, or accept it the way it is, or a combination of those things. Now, depending on what it is that you are experiencing on the journey, it may be one or a combination of those things. However, by reflecting on reactivity from the perspective of this is an opportunity, and applying some simple filters that were suggested in this video, it will automatically recalibrate you to a higher degree of internal locus of control. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an affirmation to further instill it. You can say, I recognize every day that I develop a higher degree of understanding to take responsibility for my reality. I recognize that there are many ideas, many perspectives, much information, and I'm able to easily sift and sort and find the most relevant in harmony with my vision. I see reactivity as opportunity to reveal what's within myself, to harmonize and make peace with it, so I can maintain focus and attention on what I truly want. This levels up my self-confidence. I embrace challenge and see it as an opportunity. As a result, I find myself automatically focused on what is relevant and in relation to my vision. This further develops a cumulative consciousness, which elevates my perspective to be able to see varying degrees of different perspectives and identify with the perspective that is ideal. As a result, I find myself at peace with people, with environments, with circumstances, with information, because I realize that I have the ability to transmute reactivity into proactivity by finding the accurate, varying degree-based perspective that is true and in harmony with my vision via my connection and relationship with intuition. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.